Divorce among baby boomers is becoming more common, according to census data from StatsCan. For more on what to consider when you're considering a divorce and the financial implications, we're joined by Ron Shulman, founder of Shulman Law Firm. Thanks for joining us in studio.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You say that over the last few decades, there's been an increase in the number of so-called gray divorces. What is a gray divorce?
Well, in the last 30 years, there's a significant increase for divorces for people who are aged 55 over. Just to give some perspective and statistics, in 1981, the divorce rate would have been approximately 7% for this age group. By now, it's almost 20%. And to give some more perspective, in 2013, 25%, that's almost a quarter of all divorces, involved people over 55.
And is it a greater piece of the population? I only ask because, as a nation, you know, we're skewing older as well. So is that just the reality of what's happened to the population over 30 years, or is it a very clear indication that people over the age of 55, by and large, more people get divorced today than they did back then?
It is a growing trend, and in fact, the population is expected, the senior population expected to grow significantly in the next 20 years, I believe by about 70%. So it's very significant shift in our demographics.
And so this is a very emotional thing for people to go through, probably one of the most stressful things you could do in your life. Obviously, with investing, everybody always says, don't be emotional. And here's a trend where you're seeing more people of a certain age getting divorced at a time when they're probably thinking a little bit more about things like their financial future, retirement. So what ultimately, what's happening? How are people handling this?
Well, divorce in itself is a difficult time financially. Retirement is a difficult time financially. Coupled together, it presents some very unique challenges. From my experience when dealing with clients who are going through a retirement and divorce, what we would call gray divorces, I find that one of the greatest challenges they find is the realization that there is no income to replenish their asset base. So they have an asset base which was aimed to fund the retirement of a joint retirement of both spouses, and now they will have to split this asset base and fund two retirements, and that creates a very unique challenge, both for the client's perspective and also for the firm, because in Shulman Law Firm, our goal is to make sure that our clients are able to move on and through the divorce and move on with their lives.
Right. So what happens then? Is there a suggestion that people, even though they're getting divorced, they actually keep their retirement portfolio together?
No, of course not. There are many different strategies we can put forward for clients, including restructuring of how their assets would be divided, tax-saving mechanisms. So it really depends on case-by-case basis.
What's the most common thing that happens?
Well, assets will be divided, and people are quite surprised at that. Pension, and I find clients, when I meet with them, are quite surprised that their pension will be divided, will be valued. It's part of the assets.
So as you're basically cutting up the portfolio, what are some of the pieces of advice you give on how to minimize any of the payments that are going to affect that portfolio, whether it's the taxes you're paying as a result of cutting it up or breaking it up, etc.?
It depends really on what is the portfolio we're dealing with. Is it the RSUs, or are those RRSPs, like restricted stock units, or are they RRSPs? If it gets complicated, we get professionals such as tax advisors and financial advisors to plan this type of a split. But what's very key here is there are other items in play as well, like support, for example, which may be in place. So there are tax savings mechanisms as well as a delay in payments, for example, which could be affected from our perspective, which will save the clients their financial abilities and be able to move on with their lives.
Fascinating. Ron, thanks for joining us.
It's been my pleasure.
Ron Shulman, founder of the Shulman Law Firm. Coming up, we're going to have more on our top line story. The Prime Minister